Welcome for anyone just jumping in. I can hear some little beeps. Welcome to our Lunch and Learn series for National Playgroup Week. Hear more beeps coming. I'm working off a few screens here, Susan. For anyone on the call that knows me, I'm not the most tech savvy of people. And I just got 3 screens installed. And I'm sure down the track it'll be wonderful. But at the moment, It's just, whoa, it's a lot.
It's all good.
The mouse goes in different places and a different scroll. But people who have these swear by them. So I will learn.
It all works. I'm going to raise my desk just a little bit. Hang on. All right.
Alrighty, I can still see lots of people coming in, but we will kick off because I am conscious of everyone's time. So I will minimize something on one screen, move over to the other screen. There we go. So welcome everyone to our amazing webinar. We've been doing a couple this week for National Playgroup Week, but as Susan said, for those of you that are on the start, this is the beginning of some ongoing capacity building that we at Playgroup New South Wales are really excited to do for parents. We obviously love our playgroups, but for busy working parents or parents who just want to learn a little bit more outside the playgroup environment, these webinars are going to be part of our core business, so that together we can help you on the wonderful, lovely, challenging, frustrating, glorious ride that is parenthood. And I say that as a single parent myself to a wonderful, glorious, frustrating, challenging, beautiful 10-year-old. So I'm moving out of the playgroup space, but going through some of Susan's work, I'm very excited for this. So today our webinar series is about everyday interactions with children and what that means to enhance their development and create a really strong foundation for the future, and some of that science behind what's happening in those beautiful little brains and how we can tap into it through the power of play. So I'm very excited for that. And I am joined by the super energetic and super clever Professor Susan Hespos. So before we kick off, and I will introduce Susan in a sec, I'd like to do an acknowledgement to country. I'm joining you all today from Gadigal land, but we have people here from all across New South Wales, all across Australia. And so I really want to pay my respects to elders past, present and future, and all the lands that you're joining us from. Particular thank you to any First Nations people joining us today. And at Playgroup New South Wales, we are really proud to support our First Nations families and children, because they once were, always will be, the custodians and owners of this land. But also what's really important to us is the nature of storytelling and play within our First Nations communities and how we can bring that through in our work at Playgroup New South Wales. So over to my wonderful guest speaker today, and I'm actually going to turn to Professor Susan Hespos. So you are on a mission to show that babies think before they speak, and I know you're going to touch on that today. And you run BabyLab, which is an amazing, and I would say the forefront of infant research lab in Australia with Western Sydney Uni. But beyond the formalities, Susan, I would love you to share, what do you love about this space? Why are you in this sector?
Oh, I will get to that in part of my talk, but I just have a really cool job, and I get to answer questions that just about every parent asks about their kids. Like, how did they do that? How did they learn that? And I think that's a fascinating question, and I love it because everybody at some point in time seems to ask it.
Yes. Very true. Great. And I'm Emily Kasker. For those who don't know me, I'm the CEO here at Playgroup New South Wales. I've been here for about 4 months now. And I'm personally really passionate about the playgroups that we run, but a lot of my work as well is about who's not coming to Playgroup, who aren't we reaching, and the power of play as early as possible. And I'm on a mission to make sure that every single child, every single family, and every community across Australia has universal access to free playgroups, place-based in your local community, because we know not only the stats around child development, but I'm personally really passionate also about peer-to-peer support for parents, as well as that community building that playgroups bring. So, kicking off with a little bit of housekeeping on our wonderful webinar today. The recording will be shared with you all in full and up on our website tomorrow, and all the slides that Susan shares will also be available to you after the event, which is great. We will have the chat function available during the webinar. So please, as Susan said, ask your questions. I'll be monitoring it across my new 3 screens, which I'm not too tech savvy on. And so where they are relevant in what Susan's talking about, I'll jump in and share some of your questions with Susan, and then we can also share some at the end. So please don't be shy, because it's your questions that really add the richness and the practicality to what we're talking about today. Because this is National Playgroup Week, obviously I'm biased, one of our favourite weeks of the year. I just wanted to shout out our website. We've got so much happening this week. We did a great webinar last night with Jen Muir from Connected Parenting about building small moments into everyday life and how that they can really enrich play with your child. And I think a key message I took away from that, there's some great practical tips in there. So that recording will be up on our website today. A key takeaway that I took is that play doesn't need to be a big thing, and you don't need to dedicate a whole heap of time or resource to it, that there are some really tiny moments you can do with your child. So I recommend that one. And yesterday we at Playgroup New South Wales launched a report that we commissioned with Lego Australia, because together we were really keen to understand what does this nexus of modern parenting look like, and where does play fit in this modern world of parenting, and some really interesting insights in there. Probably not surprising that 80% of parents are feeling stressed, overwhelmed, tired, stretched for time. But the flip side is 96% of parents value play. We see that it's essential and important. And there were some actually really pleasing stats in there that on average of those surveyed, we surveyed over 1,000 families across Australia. 18 hours a week from mums were committed to play, and around 13 hours a week on average by dads. So we are, despite feeling stressed and overwhelmed, we are spending a lot of time playing with our kids. But as I chatted with Jen last night, and I'm sure Susan, you're going to share, it's not just a game of quantity. We can achieve a lot in quality if we understand some of the science behind play and what really nurtures our little ones. The other thing that we've got for all the parents online today is we have a great parent resource hub. This week we're putting another 30 resources on there, lots of fact sheets about early childhood development, play in the home environment and things like that. So that's all available through that National Playgroup Week website. So there's quite a bit happening. Now, Susan, this is a bit, Pierce, we didn't practice this, but this is a quote that we love to put up at the start of all of our webinars. And I think your presentation in particular speaks to this. And I think it's just a moment to remember that children need the freedom and time to play. And I think I say it as a busy parent, you sort of see play as an add-on or a luxury or another, sometimes I'll admit, sometimes a thing on my to-do list that I have to do. But actually, we really need to reposition play as a necessity, probably not just for children, but for parents and communities as well. So I'd love your thoughts on that, Susan, before we kick off.
Of course. Yeah, play doesn't have to be well planned out. I think sometimes we put a lot of stress on ourselves and overplan our kids. And play can be spontaneous, it can be short, it can be long, and it's best when it is guided by the children within confines of safety and things like that. But let them do it. It is more fun when they drive because they surprise you, they impress you. It's wonderful.
Oh, that's so true, Susan. I know we're such big proponents of that child-led play, and I know, again, you'll touch on that a lot today. So on that note, we are over to you, Susan, to talk us through everyday interactions with kids, drawing on your decades of research in this area. So I believe, am I jumping out, and are you sharing your slides, or am I just clicking through? Yep, beautiful.
That's my understanding, yeah.
Great, I will jump out.
I will jump in. Oh, I did it. I have to do it twice because I didn't turn on the sound. There we go. Okay, are you all seeing the same title slide, hopefully?
Yes, I can see that one. If anyone isn't, please let us know in the chat, and we can, we've got some tech support in the background from Work Magic. Yes, oh great, I can see some thumbs up. Great, yes, we can see it.
Okay, if all systems are go, I'll get started. Thank you, Emily, for that lovely introduction. And I am so excited to thank you all for attending. I'm excited to talk to you about something that is near and dear to my heart, which is my research, but also today is a plan where we test about 1,000 kids in our labs at BabyLab at Western Sydney University. And we've got 3 labs located in Penrith and Bankstown. And I'm talking to you today from Westmead, where our 3rd lab is located. And So we have a lot of hands-on contact with parents, and we get a lot of the same questions. So what I have done is put together our best hits, basically. So the idea is today I have just taken a couple of different topics and presented them on some slides for you. You'll have access to the slides as Emily said. And again, I hope that this is the beginning of a conversation. Emily, I put you in charge of interrupting me. If you think a question, I can stop at any time in the presentation and answer a question if it's relevant to the specific thing I'm talking about. Or I think there's 15 minutes at the end where we are going to also have an opportunity to talk. So without further ado, let me get started. Okay, there's my pretty bubbles that are moving. First, I'll start with a little bit more about me. I am a researcher. If you can't tell already, I have an American accent. I spent 20 years as a faculty member at a university called Northwestern University in the Chicago area of the US. I was also affiliated with a department of the Learning Sciences Department, one of the first Learning Sciences department in the United States. So I have background in education research as well. The thing that I like to study in my research is I'm interested in what makes humans smart. So I have raised a son and several dogs, and they both have grown up in our house. We talk to both of them. We love both of them. And happily, my son develops language, and my dog has a few commands. He communicates a little bit, not so much. So they're very different. And how are they different and things like that? These are the questions that I ask in my research. In 2022, I moved to Sydney to lead the Baby Lab at Western Sydney University. The Baby Labs at Western Sydney are really cool because we have 3 different locations, and they are in places where people tend to speak a multitude of different languages in addition to English. And as somebody who is interested in how thought influences language and how language influences thought, this is a perfect opportunity, and it doesn't exist research-wise anyplace else in the world. So I feel very fortunate to be here at Western. Okay, so to sum up my research, I've been doing research for 30 years, so summing it up quickly is not something I'm really good at, but there is limited time and I want to get to your questions, so I'm going to try. One way to sum up the research that I have done is that babies think before they speak. This means that around about 2 years of age, kids start uttering their first sentences and things like that. And there's a lot of cognition. Every parent knows there's a lot of wants and needs going on in those first 2 years. And it also means in a sort of philosophical way that language is capitalizing on something that is already there, really early in development. Another way that you could sort of describe the research that I do is to show how really smart babies are. Babies have had a bad rap at times. People sometimes portray them as these sort of hapless blobs and the world just impinges on them. And the research in the last 30 years has really shown that this is unfair. Babies are learning from the get-go. They are actively processing the information in their environment. Yeah, they're pre-verbal, so they're not going to write you a paragraph about the things that they've learned. However, they really are amazing learners, and they are absorbing things at rates that are phenomenal. And our research reveals that, and I'll share some of that with you today. Another thing that I've learned now as I get older is that every kid develops differently. Every parent that has more than one child knows this, right? They may have similar genetics, they may grow up in the same household, but boy, no 2 kids are the same. And that's because there's no single path to development. We need to meet kids where they're at. And that means meeting one kid in a different place than meeting another kid. So with those sort of that's what my basic research has looked at in a very broad sense. Another reason why I took the job here in Australia is that Australia is amazing for doing public outreach for science. Playgroup New South Wales is one of these examples. Other examples that we've done in my lab are, there's a really, if you're interested in more information, there's a really great docuseries called Babies. It's available on Netflix. It's been up there for a couple of years. If you'd like to see my lovely face, they covered the research in my lab when I was at Northwestern. At the beginning of in season 2, episode 1, were the first 20 minutes. But really, the whole series is amazing. They cover a variety of different topics. They got top-notch researchers and ask them lots of questions. And so, Emily, as we were talking about playful learning landscapes, in the last couple of months, we've been doing some presentations on that together. And Kathy Hurst-Pasek of Playful Learning Landscapes is also covered in the baby series. So really interesting researchers. I encourage you to take a look if you're interested. Another thing that we do that's a little closer to home is that when I first got to Baby Lab here at Western Sydney, we did a podcast. We took the experts at the Institute, the Marks Institute, where I do my research, and we gathered questions from parents, and we had the experts here at Western Sydney answer them. However, we didn't want to get all geeky about it, and so what we also did is the podcast is hosted by Emma Watkins. So if you remember, she was the first female Wiggle, and she is now onto a new enterprise called Emma Mema, and she's great. She's an amazing communicator, and so she made it much more interesting. She wouldn't let us be geeky and get caught down into our details, and she met with parents. They asked their questions. We gave answers. So that is freely available on our website. If you just search for Baby Lab on however you get your podcast, you'll find it there. All right. So those are two ways to get more information. There's a variety of these sort of tidbits throughout my talk today. So let's just turn to some of the characteristics that babies have and why they're such amazing learners. So one thing to take away is that babies are always listening. This is demonstrated by the fact that even in the last trimester of pregnancy, their hearing is functioning. They actually show a preference for their mom's voice because they've been hearing it. They actually show, it's a very specific preference. They show a preference for their mom's muffled voice because the voice is passing through the abdomen wall. And so they have a preference for mom's voice kind of filtered compared to mom's voice clear. And they can distinguish mom's voice from another female voice and things like that. So it's amazing that this is a pretty mature ability from the get-go, and it's pretty sophisticated. They can tell the difference between different accents of different languages. So if the mom speaks English, English has a tendency to put the emphasis on the first syllable word, like baby, when you say the word baby. However, in French, it's the opposite. It's baby. And they put the emphasis on the second syllable. And babies can tell the difference between English and French in the first days of life. It's phenomenal. The other thing that they do is they can localize the sound. So if you snap on one side of a child's head, they will turn towards the sound. So they're trying to localize the sounds. They hear something and they follow it up with a gaze and try to look in that direction. It's even more sophisticated than that. They have music perception. So I'll play this little clip. It is sort of a lovely nursery rhyme song, and it will go along, and it's a consonant sound, and babies will listen to this too. However, if it changes to a dissonant sound, the babies recapture attention, and as adults, so do you and I. So as you can tell, it just changed, right? And it kind of grabs you. And this is a very abstract thing. The relation between the actual notes is the same for the consonant and the dissonant, but one is pleasing, the other not so much. So babies have the same reaction as adults do on this. So what does this mean for you as a parent? It means play. Play music, play whatever your favorite music is. It will probably end up being your kid's favorite music too. Don't worry about dancing or singing with your child. They're not judgy. They enjoy it. They love doing things in sync. So singing and moving in concert with the beat and things like that. It's a joyful way of interacting with your kid. And hearing is pretty well developed from birth. So it's something to capitalize on. Another sensory system that's pretty well developed at birth, and we don't play with it enough with our kids, is that taste and smell are actually functional early in development. Again, even in the last trimester, babies are being exposed to the tastes and smells that are part of mom's diet. So mom's diet, certain things like the smell of coffee and curry get into amniotic fluid, and the kid is bathed in that. And so they're exposed to these very subtle smells by the time it gets into the amniotic fluid, but it's a way that they're being exposed to their culture even in the womb, and they have preferences for these smells afterwards. It's again, they prefer sweet taste just from birth, and newborns can even recognize their own mom's body smell as well as the smell of their mom's breast milk versus somebody else's breast milk. So it's a sophisticated, detailed knowledge, and babies have this ability early on. It's so cool. So it's a really fun way to interact with your kid. Let them smell a flower. Let them smell, a piece of fruit. see what their reactions are, and talk about it, label it, describe it, see if they like it, see what the reaction is, and if they don't like it. It's just another really fun way to interact with your kid. So those are two examples of hearing and smelling that are pretty available early in development. This next one, not so much. So infants are always looking, but as you can see, this is the same picture, just modified so that you can see what clarity it has at different ages. So newborns are legally blind if you give them a vision test. By 4 weeks, it gets a little bit clearer. By 8 weeks, clearer still. By 3 months, it's really quite good. 6 months, there's minor variations between what a 6-month-old can see, but it does go through minor improvements straight up to 14 years of age. So infants are always looking. As adults, we rely on vision probably more than many of our other senses. Now, the reason it's blurry in those first several weeks of life is that the eyeball itself is growing enormously fast. And the lens, the place where you put your contact, when you put a contact in your eye, has to accommodate to the length of distance between the front of the eye and the back of the retina, which is the back of the eye, where they process the visual information that's coming in. So if anybody remember, like, when you look through binoculars and you have to change the focus for it to work to see clearly, that's kind of what's going on with the babies and their eyes in terms of visual acuity in those first several weeks of life. What kids tend to look at in those first couple of months is things that they can see most clearly. So these are the characteristics of things that they can see most clearly. High contrast. High contrast colors are like black, white, and red. So black, if you ever are in the newborn section of a toy store, everything's marketed with black, white, and red. And it's because babies love it. They can see it most clearly. Also, simple patterns are what babies can detect in these first couple of months when the world is quite blurry. So like a black circle on a white field, it's going to seem really exciting to a baby because they can see it clearly. Another thing that's fully mature pretty much at birth is motion detectors. So if you shake something in front of a newborn's eyes or face, they're going to be more likely to be able to follow it, to track it, things like that. So what that means is talk to your kid about the things that you're seeing. And even in those first couple of months, it's very odd because it is a monologue. They're not talking back to you yet, but they are in fact listening and processing the information that you're talking about. So keep it going. You're not going crazy. The reason you're motivated to do it is because they are in fact learning, and you'll notice that they'll detect things, they'll react differently when you talk about stuff versus if you just let them look at it. So it's always fun. All right, let me tell you a little bit about what we do in the baby lab. These are one of the problems with babies is that they're not going to write you an essay in the first couple of months of life. They don't come with an instruction manual. So you have to capitalize on what they're good at. In the baby lab, we have them sit on their parents' lap in front of a puppet stage, and we show them things on the stage. And the thing that's great about babies is they look at things they find interesting, and the moment they get bored, they look away. And if you look away for 2 consecutive seconds, we take that as baby language for like, I'm so done with you, move on. And so we do things like this. This is one study that we have going on right now. These are 2 little camels. We have them on the puppet stage. We raise them up. We tilt them to the left. We tilt them to the right. We put them back down again. And we repeat that little dance with the camels until the kids look away. If they look for a full minute, we also end the trial. But if they look away for 2 seconds, anytime during that minute, computer beeps, we lower the screen, we go on to the next trial. So this will be one trial that we show the kids. This is another trial that we show the kids. This is the 3rd trial, and this is the 4th trial. So just look at that for a second. And what is it? Compare them. What do you see across these different things that you take away? The kids can't read an instruction manual. They're just sitting there watching. And so there's no color. It's not like they all have eyes or faces. They're all different shapes. We did that on purpose. The only thing that's consistent across all of these trials is that it's always a pair of objects that are identical. And so that's abstract, right? That's not pink. That's not eyeballs. That's not toys. It's a pretty abstract thing. So the idea is if kids actually abstract that information from all the examples that we show them, and then we show them in the test trial, they're like, oh yeah, been there, done that. I'm kind of bored with seeing 2 identical things. And so we would compare looking time at that event to this event, which is the objects aren't identical. They're different. And what we find is that infants look significantly longer at this one that has different objects versus the one that's the same. They have abstracted this rule like same objects. And that's great. So in addition, if we show them different objects for the first 4 examples and they compare across that, they show the opposite pattern. They look longer at the one that's the same. So infants learn this in 2 minutes. No other species on Earth can actually learn this that quickly. It's amazing. In addition, AI cannot learn this. So there's always this fear mongering going on about what is it that AI is doing and is it taking over the world? To put that in a perspective, there are no AI engines that can compete with a 3-month-old infant, okay? Infants are smarter every time. They're faster, they're smarter. And so it should help keep those kinds of ideas in perspective. So infants have the ability to learn abstract patterns like same and different. We first started doing this with 9-month-olds, then we got confident, we tested 7-month-olds, and then we found that 3-month-olds can do it too. So what does this mean? Kids are smarter than you ever give them credit for. And that's a really fun sell to tell parents about. Talk to your kid. The moment they're bored, you're going to see it in their face. And so then change it up a little bit. But it's amazing the things that they pick up. And so don't underestimate them. Okay, another topic that is really popular in our lab is that language really matters. This diagram right here sort of summarizes broadly my views on language. If this is when kids are born, kids have thoughts before they speak, and they also make language sounds, but the two are not really connected. And here, around about 2 years of age, so I don't know if you guys can you see my pointer, I hope? So at first, they're separate, and then after a little while, there's around 2 years of age, language and thought start to overlap a little bit. So this, every parent knows if you've been through it, is called, there's a big vocabulary explosion. And they're going, what's that? What's that? What's that? What's that? So that's when these things start to overlap a little bit. And then as they become older and as adults, the overlap grows, okay? So what's interesting is even as adults, there's still gonna be thoughts that you can't put into words. And sadly, there's always gonna be words that have no thought behind them. But broadly thinking, this is how we conceptualize the interplay between language and thought. Only humans can have language influence thought and thought influence language to the degree that we do. The other thing that our research, particularly over the last 10 years, has shown is that multiple languages are really good. There are additional advantages for every child that is exposed to more than one language early in prior to adolescence, really. It gives more cognitive flexibility, better social perspective taking skills, code switching, being able to change from one task to another, is also improved in kids that speak more than one language. However, language itself, monolingual or multilingual, it doesn't matter, is a convergence of a bunch of really independent skills that come together and make something awesome, which is our spoken language. There are social components. For example, I have thoughts in my head. I'm using language to convey those thoughts, hopefully to you. And then it's going in your head and maybe you learn a couple of new things. That would be cool. So that's the social component of language. There's the motor component of language. It is a fine motor skill to get your lips and your tongue and your breath to coordinate to make sounds that enunciate clearly. And this takes a while for kids to learn. There's nothing cuter than an 18-month-old or 2-year-old trying to say the word yellow, right? Like it's a really hard word to enunciate and they get it wrong for quite a while. So that's the motor component of it. This is another case where if you've heard of something called baby signs or even just sign language can be used prior to getting your motor control to work. So kids at 7, 8 months clearly want to communicate. And sometimes you can alleviate some of their frustration by learning a few baby signs. And so by, either coming up, Googling baby signs online, you can learn like I'm hurt, I'm hungry, I've had enough food, all of these different things. Or even within your own family, you'll probably come up, the kids will develop their own. There's, some kids might pull their ear when they're tired or rub their eyes in a certain way. And that's essentially a gesture, which is just as good as sign language in a variety of other contexts. And kids can produce those before they can get their lips and their tongues to coordinate in the fine motor skills that they need to enunciate clearly. And then also there's the cognitive aspects of language. So language allows us to talk about tomorrow and yesterday, to talk about things that aren't here in our current immediate environment, like my car is parked in the parking lot. That's an abstract thing that isn't right here with us, but you know what I'm talking about when I use language to do that. So the take-home messages from this are embrace exposing kids to new languages. It's never a bad idea. Even if there's a question about language delays, it doesn't seem to interact at all with whether or not the kid is monolingual or bilingual. Growing up with multiple languages does not delay language acquisition. They're learning twice as much stuff. It's pretty cool. The other thing about language is label things early. So I'm returning to this idea of the monologue. When the kids are really young, just talk to them. They will pay attention to you. They will take in and absorb the regularity in your speech, some of the vocabulary. They will follow the attention of what you're talking to and maybe learn some things. So go for it. Also, if anybody out there has concerns about where their child's vocabulary development is, you can follow this QR code, and they'll be sending out the slides tomorrow. And on our website, we have something called the ASI SF. It is a way of just doing a few check boxes. It takes 10 minutes to assess you can assess where your kid's vocabulary is. And then we have available on our website the norms from the thousands of kids that have taken this same test and what is typical development and what is atypical development. There's a lot of individual differences in terms of how language unfolds. If you go, now we are not medical professionals, but what I'm saying is that if you fill out if you're concerned and you fill out the ASI-SF and you print it out and you take it to your GP, there's one conversation that happens when you go to the GP and just say, I'm a little concerned about the vocabulary development. There's a different conversation that ensues when you go to the GP and says, I'm concerned about language development, and I did this at ASI-SF, and show the results to the GP. So we're trying to help you. We're trying to get the information out there. And so this is one way that you can engage. All right. That's about language. Next, I'm going to talk about number concept. I feel like number concept sometimes doesn't get as much. It's as cool as language, but sometimes I think it just doesn't get the same coolness factor. So one way to sort of explain how cool and complex numbers are is look at this picture right here. Imagine you didn't know anything about numbers and somebody said to you, you see all of these pictures? They all mean 3. The person would be incredulous. They'd be like, you got to be crazy. Those all look really different from each other. But we don't even think about how hard this is. We've just internalized it, right? So there is the numeral 3. There's the word 3. There's the fact that these complex objects, there's 3 of them. And there's 3 of these long, skinny objects. So they're both 3, even though they look completely different. And then you look at this one. This is 3 circles inside squares. And so that's still 3. And this is a completely different square, but it's got 3 circles inside it, like on the face of a die. And then you've got 3 fingers, and you can represent it that way too. So this is really hard to learn. And kids will reveal how hard it is to learn because it takes them a couple of years to figure it out. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what that developmental trajectory looks like. You can start teaching your kid about number by singing a song. It goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And it can go on as high as you have the patience for. And if you're raising a multilingual child, teach them how to count in multiple languages. It'll allow them to compare. That's kind of cool. They get this, most kids get this between 1 and 2 years of age. Now, it makes you feel like your kid is so smart. Maybe they can count all the way up to 20. It's fabulous. Encourage it. Make them count by 2s. Make them count by 5s. Whatever. You can always up the challenge a little bit. One thing that will take you back a notch, just because they can count this counting song, they can sing the counting song, doesn't mean they actually know what it means. It's just a song at first. So in the lab, to demonstrate this, we have a little test where we've got a whole bunch of different colored ducks, and we have this big white plate, and Johnny is sitting on one side of the table, and I'm sitting on the other side of the table, and I've got all these ducks, and I put the plate out there, and I say, Johnny, can you put one duck on the plate? And he's a good kid, and he picks up one duck, and he puts it on the plate. Let's say he's a 2-year-old, and the parent is proud, and they're smiling, and that's all great. Then I say, that's great, Johnny. And I take it off and I put it back with the other ducks. And I say, can you put 2 ducks on the plate? And with equal confidence, Johnny grabs the rest, a handful of ducks that is, as many as his little hands will hold, and he puts them all on the plate. At which point the parent's face usually gets a little concerned, but don't worry. It takes most 2-year-olds usually know what 1 means, and they can give you 1 and then say, yeah, that's 1. But it takes them 6 more months to learn 2. They know it's more, they just don't know how many more. So they'll just give you everything their little hands can hold. Then it takes, so after little Johnny learns 1 and he gets that right, and then you say put 2 on, and 6 months later, and he puts 2 ducks on the plate and beams. Then you say, that's great, can you do 3? Again, he'll pick up all the ducks and he'll put them on the plate. He knows 3 is a number. It's in that song that he knows, but he hasn't made the connection between it being a specific countable amount. Now, what is really cool, and so again, it takes like 3-4 months sometimes to learn what a 3 is, and then we call them 3 knowers if they get that question right. However, what's really cool is what happens next. In the next few weeks after they become a 3 knower, sometimes they need to become a 4 knower too, but there's this aha moment where the kids go, oh my gosh, that counting song refers to adding 1 more every time. And so they have this insight where they suddenly get 4, they know what 5 means, they know what 6 means, they know what 7 means, and as high as their count song goes, they understand what those things are. So this is really cool. There is no other species on Earth that can do that. You can train a chimpanzee up to 9, but it takes 1,000 trials to learn 1, 1,000 trials to learn 2, and 1,000 trials each time you teach them a new number. They never have that insight that all kids develop, and they kind of they get excited about it, which is really great. So number concept takes a little time to roll out, just like language development, and reading take time, years, months. Here's one other aspect of number. There's many aspects to language. There's also many aspects to number. If you follow this link, it's called Panamath, and it's a really fun game to play with your kid at a variety of different ages. They can change to make the game more challenging. But what it does is it shows on a screen yellow dots and blue dots, and the kid's task is which one has more, and they either press a button for the blue ones or for the yellow ones, and it'll give you feedback of like a chiming yay, you got it right, or a meh, no, you got it wrong. And kids that aren't 2 knowers or 3 knowers or aren't really great at this yet can say what is more versus less. So it's kind of interesting that they understand 20 is less than 30, but they don't understand what 3 means. So there's different aspects to number concept. I encourage you to go try the Panamath site. It makes you feel like your kid's super smart because they're looking at these really large numbers and making appropriate judgments about it. I could go down a rabbit path about what that means. It's probably tied to foraging behavior and similar to what other species do when if they find water 80% of the time here, but only 20% of the time here, many species will split their time 80% where they find the water and 20%. Are they really good at ratios? Are they good at maximizing return? Not in a numerical sense like you and I or like a financial person would know, but it is linked to survival, and evolution probably favored the ability to judge where you're going to maximize food. So I could go into more detail, but I'm not going to. I'm going to try to stick to the clock here. All right, so number concept is cool. This means you should make it a game, play with numbers. In the car, ask them to count by 2s, ask them to count by 3s, ask them to recognize a number on a sign and tell you what number that is. There's a way to ask the kids to make their own rules about number. You can play the knower task. You don't need the cute, colorful ducks that we have. You can do rocks, you can do pencils, you can do forks, whatever you have a lot of around. And then you can also ask kids, like, which line at the grocery store has more people in it, and see how they judge. They'll be pretty good at it. Okay.
Really like, sorry, Susan, I was just going to jump in. I really love that practical tip around almost like stacking play into everyday activities. I know as a single mom on the run, I do that. Like I'm in the lift and I'm like, oh, I'm going to cover up. So let's count in the lift, or while I'm waiting for the coffee, building it in. So I think that's such a great tip for parents.
Good. Yes, it is. And it doesn't have to be detailed. It doesn't have to be like from 3 until 4, we will play. It can be while you're in the lift. Find the number. Can you hit the button with the number 4 on it? All of these things are really fun. And you'll find that other people will follow in too. And it's a good way to get, kids playing and guiding their knowledge. And also their early concepts are really different than ours. And it leads to great stories, points of pride and points of worry at times. So this is, it's not always about the fun for the kids. It ends up being fun for you as well. And if they see you enjoying it, they model that behavior, which is really great. Which brings me to screen time.
Yeah.
This is something that we get a lot of questions about, and we should. All forms of technology are tools that have to be negotiated. So whether or not it is a 10-year-old and texting, whether or not it is how you're sitting in front of a television, whether or not it is using an iPad, ebooks versus real books, all of these are different types of technology. These are concerns that parents have had literally going back to the printed word. People were really worried about the onset of the printed word and that it was going to ruin thinking. And yeah, there's good books and there's bad books. There's books kids should be exposed to and books they should not be exposed to early on. Same thing with the technology today. Are there advantages to texting? Yes. Kids spell earlier better, sort of, with texting. For some shy kids, it's a great way for them to feel comfortable making that first initial contact. However, as we all know from the pandemic, it's not as great. Does it work in a global pandemic to learn over Zoom? Yes. Is it great? Not really. It's fine. When there's tragic things going on in the world, it will suffice, but there's nothing like face-to-face contact. It is definitely a diminished form of communication where technology glitches happen. It's just not the same as face-to-face contact. So you really want to encourage your kids to use live if they can, and to limit it. So the research shows that it's the quality of the interaction that matters. It's really hard to say 0 screens, right? We are using as parents screens ourselves, and so it's in the house. And so what you need to do is teach kids how to handle it the way and model the behavior that you want to see. So questions to ask are, what is it that they're doing? Is it interactive? There's plenty of interactive things on the web. There's interactive television. If a parent or caretaker can be with the child and interact with them while they're on the screen, so they're jointly attending to the screen and talking about the things that they see, that's better than some boring, repetitive, like just keep on killing the space invaders. And so you want to ask questions about whether or not it's educational. Are they learning something new, or are they playing that game for the 20th time in exactly the same way? Ideally, you want things to be iterative, to up the challenge, to make it novel, to explore new ideas, not just repetitive. And so that's something you want to avoid. Is it age appropriate? And what is it that they're actually learning? And so are they learning useful knowledge? Can you change it in a way where kids are sponges? So if you could ask them questions about, they learn stuff about history, they learn stuff about art, they learn stuff about dance, or whatever topic they're interested in. The internet can be an amazing resource of information. So you want to sort of change it up, make it novel, make it challenging for them, and try and make it appropriate. So live interactions are always gonna be better than digital, but there are no absolutes. So we have to sort of manage it. Then what it means in terms of suggestions for parents is you want to hold them to consistent limits on screen time, right? So it can be used as a very convincing reward. It is a great barter system. And what you're teaching kids when you're teaching them that screen time can be a reward is that they can live with it and they can live without it. And you're teaching them to negotiate it for themselves for when you're no longer there, supervising how much time they're spending on it. So you want to train moderation. And, if they do something really bad as a teenager, you can take that cell phone away for a week and they will not, in fact, die. Many people have grown up without them. And what's great, if you live through those first 2 days where you've taken their phone away, they start becoming really social again and in lovely ways. And so, it ain't pretty all the time. It's a battle. It's going to be something that has to be negotiated. So here's the worst news I have to tell you is you need to model the behavior you want to see. So you can say to your kid, no cell phones at the dinner table. But you also have to put your cell phone away then. And so kids are sophisticated social creatures. You could say, Mommy's waiting for a really important message. I'm going to look at my phone tonight during dinner. And there are exceptions and things like that. But again, imitation is a very powerful learning mechanism throughout development. And so if you model the behavior you want to see, it comes back to you in some awful and amazing ways. And so I'm happy to entertain any further questions about screen time but let me try to wrap this up. I think I only have a couple slides left. Okay, so broadly speaking, our research impact as BabyLab, as somebody who studies cognitive and child development for a living, is we are funded by your tax dollars. So we are mandated to give our information to the public. And so we invite you into our lab. We have a variety of studies that go on. We share the information from our studies. Our lab is world famous for studying bilingualism and showing the complexities and benefits and advantages conferred by raising bilingual children. Our stuff is all science-backed, otherwise we wouldn't win the research grants. And we have long-term policy implications, and that's why we work with wonderful people at Playgroup New South Wales, because we're all in this together and we're trying to make things during a very stressful time of life a little bit easier. So going on, what I want to do is show you a video. Let's see if it works. This is sort of what it looks like in our lab. This is me with a preschooler. We're doing a task. This thing with the little circles underneath the computer screen is an eye tracker. It tracks where the kid is looking on the screen and how they're processing the information. So some 4-year-olds are super shy and they don't want to talk to a stranger like me that they met 10 minutes ago. But this is the way a typical task goes on. We ask them questions. It's interactive. It is a screen, but it's interactive. They're learning stuff. In addition, we also practice what we preach. We know that learning has to be playful. So halfway through the study, we do a stretch break. And sometimes some kids teach us some dance moves. Then we do the other half of the questions. And then after the study is over, they get to choose a book or a toy to take home with them. We also do graduation ceremonies, which is really all about the parents, less so about the kids, but most of the kids are up for it. So they put on a little graduation gown. We give them a little certificate when they go home. It's really fun. So I hope that you consider participating in research in our labs. We usually have a great time, and it's an opportunity to ask more specific questions if you have them. So there's that. And then, we saw that already. Sorry, I'm getting some duplicates of my slides. All right, so thank you all, and I welcome some questions. One last thing while the questions come, here's how you sign up for our studies. So there's a QR code here. You can also just Google BabyLab and you'll find us. But basically, it's really fun to engage your children in a scientific process. It's great to get out for a day. We also give parents a $30 gift card for coming. And there's free parking at any of our labs. All right. Well, thank you all. If you haven't managed to get this QR code, you can also get it or Google it. But let me stop sharing.
Amazing. Thank you, Susan. You had me at free parking. I think all the parents on the call realize
It's
that. And
always
the
good.
certificate and the graduation is so sweet as well. So we've got some thank yous in the chat, but please, I think you covered everything so comprehensively that we haven't got any questions yet in the chat, but they are very welcome. I actually had a question for you though.
Please.
And it was an article that I was reading around babies, some work that you were reviewing, I think, in terms of babies informing the development of AI. And I found that really interesting, kind of going off the screen time. I mean, it's in that technology slant. And I found that really fascinating.
Yeah, I like a good fight, and it is really fun. I mean, you know, I wish I got them funding that Google gets for their development, but they babies are way smarter than any computer ever. And so it is fascinating to see what it is that where the space separates, right? Like, so babies are abstract, they develop language, computers are getting better. ChatGPT is amazing in some domains, but it's still not your best friend. It really fails fabulously in a variety of ways as well. And so it just shows how far AI has to go. And this has been true, and this has been written about, honestly, since the 80s. So it's very popular to be like, oh, it's frightening what AI can do. And it is, from what I understand, it is a very good time to be a con artist. But it is not like they're as good at thinking as smallest children are. We can't come up with a robot that can navigate a classroom as well as a 1-year-old child. So they're still a long way off. They've made some big progress. Is that what you kind of wanted me to talk about, or?
Yeah. I just thought it was really interesting because I was like, what is the intersection with AI and babies, and that intuitive nature of babies and how it can inform? We now have a couple of questions coming in, which is great. Back to the screen time one, because we know this is a big thing, and you were reading things, and I'm like so guilty, not just of screen time for my son, but also like, sitting there being like, get off your phone. So we have a question here. Any recommended activities that you can do with kids during screen time? So engage together in a supervised environment rather than, I think, just letting kids go off on their own into the deep, dark world that can be the web.
I think what it is just be a part of it. So follow in your kid's interest and help them do the Google search, help them play the game, and follow their interest. There's a wealth of interesting stuff that is out there, and trust your gut. If you feel like they're learning something, they probably are. If you feel like you're learning something, your kid is probably learning something too. So, as long as you want to find this sweet spot where the kid is engaged, has a certain sense of control over what they're doing, and you're, as a parent, you're really good at reading your kid's signals. So sometimes you'll get them to a website that completely overwhelms them. Well, then go to a different website, play a different game. And there are various things that I didn't like video games in my house when my son is now 21. And but when he was growing up, I was like, yeah, I don't like video games. We're not having any. And so there weren't any in the house, but like, there's only so much you can do to control those things. So he would go over to the neighbor's house and play Fortnite. And I couldn't control it. I just let it happen. And then he would come back and I was kind of a jerk. I'd be like, so what did you learn? Did you know? Did you do anything different this time? Or was it the same as last time? Like you were killing people all the time in different ways. And so I was sort of drawing on what it was that was repetitive about it, and that it would be much more fun to go to the beach. Did you learn anything new? Gosh, maybe it would be better to go skateboarding. A whole bunch of things like that. So I was persona non grata, let's say. He didn't love my questioning, but it was pointing out that it was repetitive over and over again. And guess what? The kid doesn't play video games. I won. Took years. But yeah. So recommended activities is following in on your kid's interest and being a part of the interaction. Now, this is also not to put any more pressure on parents, right? If you need a shower because your 4-month-old is pretty overwhelming right now, put a video in front of your kid and take a shower. So again, there's a time when a video or online stuff is a blessing. If it's going to make you feel better to have a half an hour to make dinner and throw the kids someplace where they'll stay still, go for it, right? So it's this kind of negotiation that has to go on. And there's days where, like when they're sick, let them watch TV. There's going to be various things that you'll come up with that are okay to break the rules.
Yeah, which probably speaks to the next question. Obviously, there's been a lot of media around screen time for kids, and there's this potential legislation being talked about no screen time for kids under 16, and some of the other legislative levers that are being pulled. So Zula has just asked your thoughts and all what the research says about that. I think in part you've answered it, though, that it is.
I think I kind of did, yeah.
Yeah.
So the idea is, you can't say no books, right? So like basically these political arguments have played out with every single technological advance, right? So it used to be that books were only if small people even had access to books, and I'm talking thousands of years ago. Then it was all books are good. Well, no, some are good, some are bad. So we have to figure out what aspects of screen time are beneficial versus what aren't. And so in terms of the politics, I'm an American. I'm not gonna say anything about politics right now at this time and space. I'm just real happy to be in Australia, not the United States. Enough said. So I don't know enough about the political situation about these rules just yet to really speak to them.
Yeah, and fair enough, Susan. And I know we've talked about it quite a bit with parents at Playgroup New South Wales, and legislation is such a blunt and such a macro lever. And I think, like you said, we are in a time where technology is a part of and going to be a part of the future of our children's lives. But we as parents, I think, guiding and sensing that process and how our kids are going. We have another question here from a member that it's clear that research shows us how smart babies are, but what do you think are on the flip side of that, some of those societal barriers that might prevent this idea becoming more widely accepted? Because like I think you alluded to at the start, we kind of out there in the world, it's sort of the opposite view of babies, that they're not actually as smart as we're giving them credit for, I think you said. And so why do you think it's not as widely known or accepted?
It varies. It actually varies a lot across different cultures and different times. It seems that people, it's a hot mess. That's what I'm going to tell you. There are what grandparents think of kids, what parents think of kids, what men versus women think of kids, what people who have children versus people who do not have children, what educators think. Like there's so very many opinions that are out there. And almost like the previous question, like there's policy stuff that the government says how much screen time there should be. And that's macro level, like, yeah, none for the first 6 months. But then there's the micro level, right? Like, and of your kid that moment, that day. And so there's different answers at these different levels. And the thing that I find sort of interesting was like, back in 1901, when the field of psychology was just starting, William James, one of the early starters of the field, said, babies are a blooming, buzzing confusion. And he was just wrong. Like kids are super smart and they're sophisticated in how they're approaching the world. But sort of Victorian era said babies should be seen, not heard. They should be dressed up like adults, not children. And they're messy, right? And so we've come a long way, and that's really good. There's even little micro fights going on, which is funny. So like there's all these things like the studies from my lab, we show kids, no instruction manual, sit down in front of a puppet stage, we're going to record how long you look at things and how long you don't look at things, and make conclusions about what's going on in the brain based on that. And we show, based on that, babies are super smart. We are scaffolding them like you wouldn't believe. We're giving them multiple examples right in a row, test them really quick, no retention, that kind of stuff. And what we show is that ability, elements of it are there in existence, early months. It's there. That's amazing. And then you ask a sort of similar question about like, babies know that hidden objects continue to exist, right? So if I show you my pen is right here, it goes behind my notebook and it comes out the other side, it's probably the still same pen. But if you ask a 4-year-old, 3-year-old, you show them, now it's not my pen, it's a ball and it's going to roll down a ramp. And there's 4 doors in this ramp. And there's a big screen that shows you the ball should roll to the door and stop. Kids can't find the ball behind the barrier. They don't, it's almost as if they've completely lost their knowledge that they had as infants. And so literally there are empirical articles that say, why are babies so smart and toddlers are so dumb? And it's not that we think they're smart and get stupid. I really don't think that. But what it is that we think of babies as blobs. And so if we find any evidence of intelligence, we're like, oh my gosh, it's amazing. And toddlers, those poor little guys need better public relations. Like, we think of them as mini-me's, right? We put them in cute little boots and jeans and jackets, and it's like adult clothes that's just small and it makes them look so cute. And they walk and they talk, and then we're shocked that they don't think like us. We're like, wait a minute. They are walking and talking and answering your questions. So babies don't do that. So it's kind of, there's this terrible joke, but it gets the point across. There's a kid that asks a parent, what's coffee taste like? And the parent responds, sadly, it smells better than it tastes. And the kid goes, oh, like shampoo. Right? So it's cute, right? It sort of shows you that, like, you think this kid's super smart and the parent's kind of savvy by giving sort of an indirect answer. And then you're like, well, but the kid's right.
Yeah, can't argue with that.
Yeah, so this is like playful learning. This is ask your kids questions. Ask them, does the moon follow you at night? Ask them where wind comes from. 2-3 years of age, they have all this confidence, but no content really to kind of back up the confidence. And they come up with these great answers to world's questions like, you know, how would you like to build the world? And you have these really fun things. You can ask kids like, what does integrity mean to you? Watch out, you're going to get some really great answers. All right, so sorry, I'm going on too long, but
No,
I think
great.
I answered that question.
No, that was a great answer. And also, I think it's a great segue into where at time. But like, thank you. I think a big pillar in this is the research that you're doing to create that evidence base and to change the perceptions around what's going on in the minds of babies and toddlers. And there's a lot happening in there.
There's a lot happening, and it can happen during play is really, you know, I mean, I know it's the message of the week, but it actually happens to be true throughout life, right? It's true. Kids need to play. Adults, we need to play too. Yes. And it's ideal if you can play with your kids and find things that you enjoy and find things that both of you like doing. So kids are pretty malleable, and so take them along for the ride.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much, Susan. Thank you to everyone for attending. We're going to pop in the chat now. We do have a little quick, very super quick survey at the end because we do want to know not only what did you think of this session, but please, we want lots of ideas for next sessions because we're going to be doing some more with Susan and she can speak on absolutely everything. And so we want your ideas on what do you want to know so we can tailor it. Thank you so much, Susan. So many great insights and so many learnings I've taken away from that I just didn't understand how our little babies and toddlers see the world and how we can really tap into that, but also maybe pull back from some things that we might have assumed as well. So
yeah, I think it's great. Well, thank you for having me. It's been really fun. And I look forward to actually reading some of these. There's a lot of chats going on. So thanks very much for everyone's questions and attention. And please come to BabyLab.
Yes, come to BabyLab. We've put the get involved in there. Please fill in the survey because we want to know what you thought, but also what you want to hear from across the year. And we'll see you all again very soon. Thank you, everyone, so much for taking an hour out of your day to join us. We really appreciate it. And we'll see you all soon. Thank you.